Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion. My name is Andy Fernandez. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at HYCU, and I'm joined by Ashish Rao, who's our Senior Product Marketing Manager here at HYCU as well. We're very excited about this topic. For those of you who are joining us live, if you have any questions, please leverage the Q&A function and specifically go to that Q&A button, and you'll be able to ask any question. Ashish and I will make sure to answer any question that you have during or after, and we'll follow up making sure that you have a copy of the presentation as well. If you are joining us on demand later on, you will be able to have access to all of this and reach out to us directly at HYCU. Now, the focus and what I'm very excited about and the focus of today's discussion is around Microsoft 365 and Microsoft 365 data protection. And the title and the focus today is your data, your storage. Most organizations that we've talked about today are already protecting Microsoft 365. This is something that's known. It's an enterprise IT application and platform that's being used. But we're going to have a very unique discussion today around your backup data, your storage, and the control and leverage that you have over your vendors. And that's going to be the focus of today's conversation. So let's get started. I'm super excited to kick this off with Ashish. For those of you who are encountering HYCU for the first time, our mission in HYCU, we're the fastest growing data protection as a service company in the world. But our mission, our focus, everything that we do revolves around making sure that we can build a safer world through universal protection of data. And although we're having a Microsoft 365 conversation today, our entire focus is making sure that your entire data estate, your entire technology stack is completely protected with HYCU. And we have over 4,600 organizations globally, over 78 countries, trusting HYCU with the crown jewels of their environment. That could be Microsoft 365, it could be Nutanix, it could be every single workload that they have that they're protecting with HYCU. And we have, of course, global partnerships to make sure that we can deliver our services, our platforms to you anywhere in the world, and that you can trust HYCU to have your back and protect your workloads. Now, with that being said, before we really dive into the M365 conversation, it's really important to have a discussion around how quickly and how drastically this concept of data estate has evolved. And when I say data estate, it's essentially talking about your technology stack and the services, the infrastructure, and the applications that your organization uses throughout not just IT, but across sales, marketing, and HR. But let's go back 20 years ago. The way I like to describe it is every organization was a castle. And when I say the castle within IT, every your data center was your castle. Everything, all business application, all production applications lived in this castle. So you had full control. You could see it, you can manage it. You were responsible completely for this data center. Now, about 10 years ago, you really started seeing organizations move some of their workloads to the cloud, specifically to use it for infrastructure, but it was still considered fringe in that context as well. And then you saw, of course, organizations even adopting SaaS applications. For example, things like Salesforce, but also Microsoft 365. So organizations used to host SharePoint Server, Exchange on-prem, and now they're leveraging a subscription to Microsoft 365. And those were some of the major applications that we're talking about. But what we saw even 5 years ago was an explosion of these applications, these SaaS applications that your organization started to use, but of course, the maturity of cloud infrastructure and the maturity of the services that you could leverage within the cloud, specifically when we're talking about DBaaS and PaaS as well. And if we look at present day and we look at where your organization sits, and as an IT leader, what your responsibilities are and what kind of data estate you're living in, you're no longer in a castle. You're no longer being able to procure, manage everything within your data center. You have to rely on decoupled services within the cloud. You have to rely on siloed SaaS applications in order to get best of breed technology. So it's not just M365 when we talk about SaaS, it's also GitHub. It's also Workday. What are the core SaaS services your organization is using across your entire organization, but also your infrastructure? Are you moving to a new hypervisor? Are you lifting and shifting to the cloud? Are you modernizing in the cloud? These are all critical things to understand within your organization. And it's going to be super important, even in the context of Microsoft 365. Why? Because of the concept of third party risk. There's this myth, and I think everyone in this conversation today understands that Microsoft 365 is their responsibility. But what we've noticed, though, is that most organizations don't realize the level of third party risk that they have with their current technology stack. Because it's not just Microsoft 365 and all the underlying applications, it's Entra ID, It's GitHub. It's every single service that your organization uses is subject to third-party risk. And that could be, for example, an outage. That could be supply chain compromise. That could be a significant mistake inside of the organization and you have an insider threat. All of these critical scenarios are something that you have to think about, not only in the context of M365, which everyone is fully aware of, but the rest of your data state as well, including everything that you're using within your Microsoft stack. So if there's three things that your organization needs at all times as an IT leader, number one is you need visibility into all the applications that are in use. What is my organization using? Not just what is IT paying for and managing, but what is sales using? What is marketing using? What is my financial services organization using? All of these applications belong to the organization and are still squarely your responsibility. That's number one. You have to be able to see something before you can protect it. Number two, you have to have complete protection and rapid recovery. And the focus of today's conversation is you have to have control and ownership of that data. And that's a critical component that we're going to speak about today. So let's talk a little bit about Microsoft 365. This is the heart of your organization. This very engagement that we're having is made possible by Microsoft 365. We responded to you via email. We planned this via email. We're storing this presentation in SharePoint. We're managing the fact that this presentation was completed within tasks. Everything was made possible. And we know that the role and how critical M365 is to your organization. So we don't have to pontificate or harp on how important it is because we all know how important it is. But let's think about it. And I want everybody in the call today to really think through, one, what are you using within 365? Are you protecting all of it? How are you protecting it? What organizations are you trusting to back up this data? And where is that backup data located as well? So with that, I'm super excited to have this conversation with Ashish. Ashish, there are over 90 backup offerings in the market for Microsoft 365. Over 90. So most organizations have already made a step to start protecting it, but they might be thinking, I'm leveraging more services inside of Microsoft. I'm coming up with a renewal and I have to really think about how I'm protecting this data. So Ashish, when you think about choosing the right M365 backup solution, talk to me about what are the components that your organization needs and why does this matter and something every IT leader has to think critically about.
Sure. Yeah, so I think in our learnings, a lot of these things have come up, right? We've sort of learned about, of course, one of the most important things is to have the right coverage. You need to ensure that your emails, your tasks, your content, your everything, your contacts, calendar, everything has to be protected because M365 keeps a lot of critical information, and all of that are quite critical and important, right? So you need to ensure that they're all backed up and recoverable. And the other aspect, which Andy mentioned also, is control. Is something that we want to focus on in this discussion is control over your backup and ownership of your backup, so that you decide where you want to keep it, how you want to keep it, and you have complete control over the sovereignty and the residency of it, right? And of course, all of this has to be where you're managing it easily. Nobody wants to deal with a difficult software, right? So everything has to be quite easy within a few clicks, within a few minutes, and all your data has to be really important. And of course, we saw that ransomware attacks are on the rise, and attackers are moving laterally to target your backups, which means that your backups need to be immutable. They need to be ransomware proof, and that's really, really critical, right? And the other thing is, of course, where you're able to recover exactly what you need as quickly as possible. So you need advanced data recovery, which gives you all the features and functionality to precisely recover what you need. And all of this goes beyond M365. I know this discussion is around M365, but actually our data estate is way, way larger than that, right? We've got different Microsoft services. We've got so many different applications in our data estate. And the solution should ensure that customers are able to actually manage a lot of these under the single roof, right? And lastly, of course, most importantly, is to be able to optimize the costs. No company wants to, of course, nobody wants to spend more than they want to or more than they have to back up their data. So total cost of ownership is something that's really, really critical.
No, actually, that's very interesting. I think for the audience to summarize, but then, when you think about M365 and you're either reevaluating a new backup and recovery solution or you're taking a step for the first time to actually start protecting M365. Maybe you've just moved there from a server data center deployment. You need to make sure that all of your critical applications are covered. We're really going to touch on Ashish right on the control component. Where is that data located? It's a very important question that you have to ask. Where is the data processed? Where are my backups stored? Who has access to my backup? And are they determining how I'm backing up my data? And then are they determining the cost of that backup as well? And do they have full control? How much of a say do I have there as well? But something that Ashish brought up that's super important as well is once you're evaluating M365 backup solution, you have to think about the concept of a data protection stack. What I mean by data protection stack is, as we talked about previously, when you had your castle, otherwise known as having all of your business applications inside of your data center, you could have a uniform backup solution. So your physical and your, for example, VMware backup solutions were able to cover your entire data estate. But now that everything is used as a SaaS application, you can't do that anymore. And you need to find third-party backup tools for each of these SaaS applications. So it's very important that you don't simply select a new backup vendor for every new SaaS application that you're using. Otherwise, you're going to create a bit of a Rube Goldberg machine for your organization in order to simply recover SaaS data, whether that is a file within M365, a repository within GitHub, or even specific configurations within Entra ID. You have to make sure that you're unifying, that you're not just adding additional silos as well. With that said, before we get started to really go into how HYCU is able to help protect M365, and I'm excited for you to hear how Ashish explains this, it's understanding that HYCU is a platform. And that platform is called R-Cloud, short for Resiliency Cloud. And our focus is making sure that you have total protection across your data estate. This means that no matter what kind of application you're using, no matter the infrastructure that you're using, that you have the ability and you have total coverage with HYCU to protect it with one vendor, but that you have visibility into this data, that you can protect it very quickly, that you have flexibility and choice in how you recover, and that you have total freedom, not only to be able to move this data, but total freedom to understand that I own my backups, I'm in full control, and I dictate the terms of how my backup data and where it is stored. So with that and understanding how HYCU R-Cloud works as a platform, let's dive in a little bit into M365. Ashish, walk me through the capabilities that we have within HYCU and some of the value, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the offline scenario in a second. But Ashish, walk us through some of the core capabilities of HYCU here in the context of M365.
Yeah. So one of the key things that we're really focusing on, Andy, is the flexibility, right? So flexibility in terms of defining when you want to take your backups, how often you want to take your backups, and how long you want to retain them for, right? Whether it's a few weeks or several years, it's completely in your control. So giving customers the flexibility using policies to define all of this within literally a minute and just automate the entire process is one of the things that we really, really want to focus here. And of course, the whole granular recovery where they need to be able to precisely recover, let's say if it's a single attachment, they shouldn't have to recover an entire mailbox for that, right? So they need to be able to identify that particular attachment and recover just that within just a couple of minutes, right? And of course, the offline export aspect, which becomes really important if, let's say, in a scenario, the Microsoft service is down, then what do? You don't recover back to your tenant, right? Because you don't have access to it. It's not up. So in those scenarios, it's very important that and HYCU provides this feature where the customers can export this on an offsite location onto their storage, right? So they can quickly get access to whatever is really critical to them, their files, some of the emails, attachments, whatever it is, and export that onto their storage and get quick access to it and get stuff going, right? That's basically what we're looking at offering here.
I think Ashish, what's super interesting about this is obviously there's so many backup vendors within M365. So when it comes to being able to provide policy-driven backups, to be able to provide recovery, this is something that you're going to be able to find across all vendors. But there's two things that we're going to focus on today that are unique and defensible differentiators for HYCU, and that's that flexible retention, but also that offline recovery or that offline access is very important. Why?
Mhm.
If you're a profit-seeking hacker, you're no longer simply focused on malware, focused on encrypting virtual machines. Why? 60% of corporate data lives in the cloud. 60% of corporate data lives in the cloud. If I'm a profit-seeking cyber criminal, I'm going to focus on those areas where I can go and encrypt or at least attack and exploit these vendors. Why? Because if I'm able to provide a supply chain attack, that's a much higher ROI activity for me than a single tenant. So when you're thinking about M365, it's not simply you that are being attacked, whether that's an insider threat or somebody seeking through privilege escalation to access your data, but it's also your vendor that's getting attacked. So you have to make sure that you have guaranteed access to this data, even if there is a supply chain compromise incident as well. So it's something very important to discuss. But let's dive in a little bit more into the backup data itself, Ashish, right? When we talk about flexible retention, this concept of sovereignty, walk me through, first of all, what options do people have today, and what are some of the perils by saying, "Hey, we'll manage the backups for you. We'll do it for you. Don't worry. We'll store it in our accounts." Like, what's wrong with that? What are the potential challenges? And then let's talk through how Haiku gives customers freedom.
Yeah. So I think this ties in with the whole concept of the whole control and ownership, right? Which today customers don't have because it's all controlled by the vendor on their cloud, on their terms. And you wouldn't want your sensitive and critical data to be defined by somebody else, right? Where it sits, how it sits, all of that. So what we're trying to do here is to give back the control to customers, and get away from the current model and actually be able to sit in the driver's seat and dictate where they want their backups to sit, on what cloud, whether it's an Amazon S3, their Azure, their Google Cloud, or even something like Dell DDVE, right? So they have complete flexibility, complete control in terms of what they choose, where they keep it, how long they retain it for, in terms of residency, which region they're going to keep the storage in. So once they have their own storage and their own, bucket, they have complete control over what they do with it, where they do it, how they set it up, even the security aspect of it, right? Which otherwise today they have very limited control over. They cannot dictate beyond a certain point how they want their backups to be managed, right? And which I feel, especially in the case of Microsoft 365, is not something that customers should be okay with, right? Because it's very critical data, it's very sensitive data in a lot of cases. So that's essentially what we're doing. And the other point about Dell DDVE is we are actually the only solution that integrates with Dell DDVE, right? Which gives customers the option to leverage advanced deduplication and compression, which again, in the case of Microsoft 365, makes a lot of sense because it's TBs of data in most cases, right? So you definitely want an option to optimize the storage, optimize the costs, and that's something that you can do with Haiku. Getting away from the current model of giving up control to actually moving to a model where you regain control and complete ownership is what we're essentially trying to do with Haiku.
No, that's very well put, Ashish. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to when another vendor is able to manage your backups, they can dictate all terms. They can dictate storage price. They dictate the storage tiers, the recovery times, the backup frequencies, and you have very limited say into where your data is and who can access it. Even if you have bring your own key, even if you have all these components, there's still third-party risk involved. When you have the ability to store all these backups in your state, in your control, with nobody else being able to access, you can dictate terms. You can dictate the storage efficiencies that you want to leverage. You can dictate what storage you want to use and how long you want to store that data without having to ask or modify anything. It's your data, it's your control. And at Haiku, something that we always focus on is we're not a storage company. We're a data protection company. And we want you to leverage your storage and have full control of your data. That is the best way to avoid third-party risk. And that's what Haiku is able to do. But Ashish, let's walk a little bit through this. Like we talk about secure backup management, because one concept is already, of course, yes, I have now the choice between saying, do I want to avoid storing my backups with another vendor? And I can actually store them now. But walk us through some of the best practices here, what Haiku follows, and this long forgotten concept of the 3-2-1 rule that we all held dearly on prem. It still applies in SaaS, and it's more important and relevant than ever in SaaS. Walk us through the best practices here and how Haiku is able to enable, the 3-2-1 rule and secure backup management, Ashish.
Yeah. So I think one of the key aspects when you look at security of your backups right on Haiku is the immutability aspect. And this is something we also discussed a few slides back is it's really important that your backups are actually immutable because otherwise they're open to they're exposed to an attacker coming in, deleting it or modifying it the way they want or encrypting it, right? So one of the key things that we offer on HYCU R-Cloud is true immutability using object lock, which essentially means that at a storage level, we are locking the backup files and it cannot be tampered or deleted or touched in any shape or form, right? Which means that can confidently and safely recover from these backup copies without thinking twice because it's truly immutable, right? So that's something that we really focus on, and I would say that's one of the key highlights. And of course, aligning with the whole 3-to-1 rule, which Andy, you were talking about, on HYCU, customers can have three different copies stored in different locations, right? And one out of it, out of which, of course, immutability comes into the factor. But customers don't have to rely on just a single or a primary copy. What if that fails? What if something's gone wrong with that, right? Customers with HYCU have the option to have a secondary copy and also have an archive. So you at all times have three copies of your entire Microsoft 365 data that you can recover from, any one of them, and they're immutable, right? So that really makes the entire system very, very secure because you've got redundancy, you've got immutability, and you can close your eyes and safely recover from them anytime, right? That's basically what you're focusing on. Of course, the whole during the whole process, the whole life cycle, everything is encrypted in transit and in at rest. And HYCU also has various other features like integrations with single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and role-based access control to ensure that access to HYCU is also secure, that nobody can actually get into your HYCU account and manage these backups and restores, right? So that's also a very, very critical thing. So HYCU itself is very tight in terms of security. So you can be sure that nobody's really going to be able to get into your environment on HYCU.
Ashish, well put here. And what Ashish is covering is not only best practices and what Haiku can offer in the context of M365, but across all protected workloads. Now, although this is the best practice, and we all in the industry have to do a much better job of following this, because as we know, with every innovation that comes, we kind of think about compliance at the end. But what we're noticing already, specifically within SaaS applications and cloud ecosystems, is that compliance is catching up. So for those who are in Europe or you're part of a multinational that does business in Europe and you're driving, for example, financial services, you have to follow something called DORA, or the Digital Operations Resilience Act. And DORA specifically, for all providers and financial service institutions, you have to have an offsite backup. And your backup system has to run outside of the very vendor that you are protecting. And you have to follow the 3-2-1 rule, have a copy available off-site, and then perform resilience testing regularly. So we know that whether it's DORA or NIS2, compliance is catching up, and you're going to see these requirements across all SaaS applications. But of course, it starts with the most critical, which is Microsoft 365. Now, to our core mission and to what our platform does and focuses on, it's universal protection of data. And we all know that your organization, you're responsible not only for M365, but you're probably responsible for many other workloads in your organization, whether purely on the infrastructure side and you're managing hypervisors, whether it's Hyper-V or Azure Stack HCI, or of course Nutanix and VMware, or you're responsible for your cloud infrastructure in Azure. Or maybe you are responsible for collaboration apps like M365 or the entire tech stack, right? We all come from different company sizes. The focus here, though, is that no matter what it is that you use within the Microsoft ecosystem and across your entire data estate, Haiku is able to help you protect it all from one place, following the same best practices that Ashish mentioned. You have your data, the backups are stored in your control, you have full flexibility to access it. You have full flexibility to back up as often as you'd like, retain as long as you like, and you have full control and leverage of your backup data across your entire Microsoft ecosystem. But it's not just within Microsoft, it's your entire data estate, your entire technology stack. When Ashish and I were having conversations with customers, and you'll ask a CIO and even CISOs at time, hey, how many SaaS applications is your organization using at any point in time? And they always say Microsoft 365 because that's top of mind. It's probably the first SaaS application they were leveraging, and they're probably paying for a backup solution. But it takes a few minutes and a few people chime in, and you start to see the real number. At first, they say, well, we're probably using 5 to 10 SaaS applications. But when you name it across not only IT and engineering and sales and marketing, you start to see that there are dozens of applications used in the organization. In fact, the average organization uses over 200 SaaS applications. Over 200 SaaS applications. All of this used to live in your data center, part of a uniform VM backup, recoverable, retained, following the 3-2-1 rule. But today it's not. It's in ether. It's in a silo. It's in somebody else's infrastructure. And you have to make sure that you can protect it because it's still your responsibility. So our focus here at Haiku, it's universal data protection. Wherever your data is, we will protect it, but we have an extremely strong focus within Microsoft 365 as well. But Ashish, if you had a couple of parting words, even if somebody is simply joining this call to evaluate what's out there. What are the best practices that folks should follow, and what is some of the guidance that you can provide folks listening in today?
Yeah, I think with whatever we've discussed on this webinar, some of the key things that I can think about is one, avoiding vendor lock-ins and being, sort of trapped into the whole vendor locked storage and paying for that bundle storage, right? Paying extra for it. That's one thing that's really important, and being able to have complete control over your sovereignty, your governance, and residency, because now you own the data, you own it, and you can define the way you want to deal with it, right? And we also spoke about the ransomware part of it, where you need to have true immutability to ensure that it's completely secure and locked from any kind of ransomware attack. And also the option of leveraging Dell DDVE to be able to get advanced deduplication and compression, which I think in the case of M365 and similar applications with a lot of data makes a lot of sense, right? And as Andy just said, consolidating all of that. You don't want to jump through 10 different solutions, manage 10 different platforms, and monitoring all of them separately, configuring them separately, right? Why not just bring them all under one single roof? And that's what you can do with Haiku. And finally, I think what I would say is working with an organization, Haiku, which has a 90 plus net promoter score, which essentially shows that we have a very, very strong customer centric approach, and we really focus on giving our customers an amazing experience. So that's how I would sum it up, Andy. Yeah.
No, thanks, Ashish. That's very insightful. And if I could try and summarize what you mentioned, Ashish, because it's all like very good feedback and best practices, it's get control of your backups, not just M365, but your entire stack. Go get control back so that you can dictate your terms and you don't have to follow whatever pricing is provided to you. Make sure it runs in the residency that your business requires. Make sure it's protected from threats. And make sure you're just not adding another backup silo to your organization, that you're actually using one trusted vendor to protect everything. And make sure that the vendor that you choose is one that you can trust to protect these crown jewels. So, with that, Ashish, I want to thank you so much. I personally always like hearing your experience. You're having regular conversations with customers as well on the Haiku team. For those interested in learning a little bit more, the best way to do this is just try it yourself. And you can scan the QR code, or we'll share a link here to a product tour where you can actually see exactly what that looks like. How do I assign a backup? How do I assign where the data is stored? What does the recovery experience look like? How do I search for a file and restore that file? So go see that for yourself. That's the best thing that you could possibly do to evaluate a solution. And of course, if you want to understand a little bit more about how it works, the storage options, what's protected, what can be recovered, you also have access to our data sheet as well. So both of these links are available. I'll leave it on for a few more seconds for those who are scanning the QR code. But with that, I want to thank you all for your time, for your attention today. We'll reach out to you if you have any questions and are always available to answer. Just go to haiku.com. You can open up a chat and have a conversation with us at any time. Ashish, thank you so much for your insights today,
Thank you,
your
Andy.
feedback. And folks, have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.